Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Wow, Susie, that's crazy. But not as crazy as the time where me and my mom, when I was about 10 or 11, would crave hot pickles, like in the middle of the night, like just insanely crave them. I don't know why. It was just like our thing. We would just go to the gas station and we would go and get hot pickles. And we would eat them. That was like our thing. And so one night I am like, let's go get a hot pickle. It's like maybe 10 o'clock at night. And so we go to the Circle K right next to our house, and then right when we pull up into the house or the Circle K, I like get this super horrible feeling, and like I am talking like the worst feeling I've ever had in my life. Like I knew something either was going to happen to us or something really bad. It was just the worst feeling I've ever had in my life. I knew that if we went into that Circle K, we were not coming out of that Circle K. So I started pulling on my mom's steering wheel, and I'm like, hey mom, we gotta get out of here. Like, we gotta go. Like, this is not good. Like, and I'm bawling my eyes out. My mom is like, what the heck? You know, like, she's like, are you okay? I'm like, no mom, we gotta go. Like, there's something really wrong. We have to leave. And she's like, she gets so frustrated that she's like, fine, okay, we won't go. And so we go home, and about 10 minutes after we get home, we see all these sirens and these freaking cops, because it's right down the street. So the cops had to go, down our road to get to the Circle K. And we see all these sirens and all these cops and all these, this ambulances and everything just going down the street. And we're like, what the heck? So we go outside and we're like looking down the street, and we see they're all pulling into that Circle K that we were just at. So we're freaking out at this point, and we're like, okay, this is insane. Like, what is going on? And about, I don't know, 30 minutes later, we turn on the news, and we're looking at the news, and we're like, it has to be on the news because of how many cops were at the Circle K, right? It has to be on the news. And sure as crap, it was on the news. Two men had gotten into the Circle K and killed everyone in the Circle K, robbing it. And had we have been inside that Circle K, who knows if me and my mom would have made it out of there. But yeah, Susie, pesto. It's pretty crazy. I have a lot more weird, like, psychic things that I've had happen to me before, so maybe I'll post them. I don't know. But if you guys like this, then yeah, cool, bye.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Wild times, Susie, wild times. You want to know what's crazy is when you are from Nova Scotia, but you randomly move to Calgary, Alberta, just for like 6-7 months in between school, and you go to a bar with a friend to play pool because you're bored and don't really want to be around people, but you randomly run into a brother that you didn't know you had who looks exactly like your dad, who passed away 2 years ago at that time. So it was like seeing a ghost for the first time, and processing the fact that you had a brother that you didn't know you had. So yeah, that was crazy. Not quite as crazy as the pesto, but
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Damn, Susie, that is nuts. It reminds me of this one time when I was in high school, and I was in driver's ed. I was 14 and a half, because in Louisiana you can get your permit, or do your education at 14 and a half, get your permit at 15, whole 9 yards. And I met this boy who was he lived about 3 hours away from where I lived, but he had family that lived about 45 minutes away, and they had friends that went to the same church and had kids about the same age. So long story short, he ended up in the same driver's ed class as me that summer. And we start dating, or whatever the 14-and-a-half-year-old equivalent is of dating, as much as you can do with a long-distance relationship when you don't have a driver's license. So we're talking on the phone one night, and this is like a few months in, because we actually did date for a while, weirdly enough. And he starts asking me about my adoption, like a lot of people do, which is fine. I don't mind talking about it. I've known since I was a baby, whatever the baby version of that is, that I was adopted. So we're talking about it, and he says, do you know your birth mom's name? Now, I was a nosy child, so I did know. It was supposed to be a closed adoption, like completely 100%. Once she handed me over, that was supposed to be it and done with once papers were signed. But I had found my adoption papers and my original birth certificate and things like that. So I did know, and so I told him, I was like, well, her name is blah, blah, blah. And he's like, that name sounds really familiar. And so he goes to his uncle, this is the uncle who lives like 45 minutes away from me, and he's like, don't you know someone with this name? And he's like, yeah, I went to high school with someone by that name. Now, he went to high school in the same town that the boyfriend is from, so about 3 hours away. And so he gets off the phone, and he calls me back later, and sends me a picture of this lady with the same name. I took one look at it, and yeah, it's me with 80s, early 90s hair. Like, there is absolutely no way that this is not my birth mom. Like, I definitely came out of it. And so I tell him, like, yeah, that's got to be her. And he's like, well, here's the thing. My best friend is related to her, so I can probably get her number if you want. And, of course, I say yes. I'm like, yeah, okay, let's do that. But then I just hung on to this number for like a solid year until I was in class one day and I'm talking to my best friend and we're talking about all that. She's like, why don't you just text her, you know, if you're too scared to call? And it just hadn't occurred to me because cell phones are new. Not everyone had one. Not all of them had a camera. You still had to pay like 25 cents a text message, like all of that good stuff. So it just didn't occur to me that I could do that. And it was also just like, how do you communicate with this person and be like, oh, hey, by the way, I think you're my mom. Yeah. Well, it's a closed adoption, too. So, like, what if she never wanted to meet me? What if she, like, just, that was her intention that we, you know, would never see each other? But I decided to send a text message, and I said, you know, just, hey, are you so-and-so? And she sends a message back and says, yes, this is so-and-so. Who is this? And I said, well, my name is blah, blah, blah. I was born on this day, at this time, in this city, in this hospital. And then there was a really long pause. I'm having a panic attack in the middle of class. Found out that's genetic because she's having a panic attack too, which is why it took her so long to respond. Yeah. Whole big thing. We start talking and confirm, you know, that is my birth mom and things like that. And so we decide to meet and all of this kind of stuff. Now, I also realize at this point that I have to tell my adopted mom. So what 15-year-old me at the time decided the best way to go about this would be is to lead with something more serious, lead with something bad, and then follow it up with that so it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. So on the way to school one morning, I just blurted out to my mom, hey, I have to tell you something. I'm pregnant. Just kidding. I found my birth mom. How this woman did not have a wreck, I do not know, because she slammed on the brakes, started back up, sped up, stopped, pulled over, and she's like, what? I'm going to need you to backtrack a little bit. So we talk for a while, and we decide, yeah, okay, let's, you know, meet this lady and things like that. And then all of that, I want to say uneventful, but, you know, it's not that it was uneventful, it's just my life, apparently. Now, the other thing was that I had always assumed if I ever did meet my birth mom that I would find out I would, you know, be the oldest child, if she had more. Because generally that's what happens. You know, you have a kid really young, because I think she graduated in 91, which is the year that I was born. And she would have had kids after that. Turns out, there's a baby picture of me that I had seen for years and just assumed it was my cousin, my adopted cousin, because it looked just like her, about the same age, and I had no reason to think otherwise. Turns out that was my older biological sister holding me in the photo when I was fresh out, like newborn, like fresh out. Because my mom had fallen in love in high school, got pregnant, and my older sister's dad was killed in a motorcycle accident before she was born. And then she had a one-night stand and got pregnant with me. Now, the story kind of splits here depending on who you ask on that, you know, that facet of the family. Because half of them say that my mom wanted to terminate the pregnancy. The other part which is the story that my mom goes with, is that this guy ended up being a POS, but at the time, of course, rose-colored glasses, she didn't realize this, but he wanted her to terminate the pregnancy. But regardless, one of them said no, and we'll just give her up for adoption, and so that's how I got put up for adoption, blah, blah, blah. After that, she ends up marrying this guy and gets pregnant with my little sister. So I am biologically a middle child. If that won't do something to your mental health as a teenager, I don't know what will. So, yeah, I mean, we don't really have a relationship. We did for a while. It's not like I go see them on holidays or anything like that. But finding my birth mom through an early teenage puppy love relationship was not on my bingo card. But yeah, Susie, store-bought pesto, that is absolutely bonkers.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Susie, that is absolutely crazy. And you know what? It reminds me of this time when I was an active duty sailor and I was on deployment, and I started getting like this really weird pain in my lower abdominal area, and the pain was bad enough to where I noticed it, but it wasn't bad enough to where I like needed medical attention. So I just kind of like went throughout my life with this pain for 2 weeks. And so finally I talked to my friend who happened to work in the medical department about this pain. And she's like, well, why don't you come in during your shift? I was working nights at this time. She's like, why don't you come in during your shift and we'll get the doctor to look at it for you? And I was like, I really don't want to bother the doctor in the middle of the night, but I guess, because it had been going on for so long. So it's 3 o'clock in the morning. She wakes the doctor up. He comes in, he checks on me, and given the information that I told him, he's like, well, I think you are just constipated. Here, take this medication. You'll have bowel movement soon. So I'm taking in this information. I'm thinking, I don't really think I'm constipated, but okay. So I take the medication. He goes, go back to your rack, your sleeping quarters, and hopefully you'll have bowel movement in the morning and you'll be fine. And I go, okay. So it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I go back to my rack. I go to sleep. I wake up 6 hours later in the most intense pain of my entire life. I hop out of my rack. Think of it as like bunk beds, only there are 3, and I'm at the very top. I hop out. My right foot connects with the ground, and I fall down. The sleeping area is like freezing cold, but I am sweating. I'm normally very fair, but I was even more pale than what I was normally. So my friend happens to be in this sleeping area, and she sees me, and she goes, oh my God. And she wraps my arm around her shoulders, and essentially fireman carries me back up to the medical department and says she needs help. So I don't remember how I got into the bed. The next thing I remember is that I'm getting an IV, and the doctor comes in and says, we think that your appendix is bursting, but we don't really know for sure if that's what's going on. So we are going to do an exploratory surgery. And if your appendix is bursting, we'll go ahead and fix it. But if it isn't, then the closest friendly country that we're next to is Bahrain. But they don't have an American hospital, so you'd have to go to the civilian hospital, and good luck, essentially. And then I fall asleep from the anesthesia. And when I wake up, how much ever time later, the doctor comes in, and he goes, you were the most interesting surgical case we've had all deployment. And I go, what does that mean? Ladies, if you weren't aware, your ovaries are supposed to be the size of a robin's egg. When they did the exploratory surgery, they opened my abdominal area, and my ovary was the size of a peach. And it was the size of a peach because my right fallopian tube had decided to twist on itself, which cut off the circulation of blood to the ovary, which caused part of the ovary to die a little bit. So they had to go in and untwist my fallopian tube. And because all this was happening on my right side, and your appendix is on your right side, my appendix was also rupturing as that was going on as well. So in the middle of deployment, I had to get a fallopian tube reversal. I had to get a little bit of my ovary cut off, and I had to get my appendix removed. But store-bought pesto, girl, that is wild.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto. I don't know why. I think it's because it never has enough garlic.
Wow, Susie. That's crazy. I'm bringing this gem back from last year. It was somewhere near 2008. I mean, you know what trauma does. But I know it was somewhere near 2008. I was working like 72 hours a week. Um, and the ex-husband was working less than a 10-minute walk away from my job. We had just moved into our apartment less than a year prior. Um, and the apartment that we moved from was being surveilled by, you know, the authorities for something that I begged him to stop doing, right? And just selling stuff, you know what I'm saying? We made enough money without it for the first time ever in our lives. Um, but, you know, we were being followed. I was being followed. But when I said something, of course, I was crazy. So he was working 3 days a week. I was working like 72 hours a week. 3 days a week from like noon to 7 or something like that. So it was his responsibility to take care of any school appointments or doctor's appointments, anything with the kids on those 2 days off, Tuesday and Thursday, that he had available. To be honest, that hardly ever happened because, like, the school didn't want him there, the doctors didn't want him there, so I had to take care of most of the stuff. Understand this was way before the word narcissist was trendy, before there was any information out there about a narcissist. And I was raised to believe that there's really good inside everyone that is stronger than the bad. With all the shit that happened to me, I kept that belief for some strange reason. I don't know. Anyway, we moved, we lived our lives. We even went to Disney that year. That in itself was a shit show. Who argues in the middle of SeaWorld? I have no idea. Until one day, you know, I think I was cooking at the time, and my son and my daughter were in the living room next to this guy. This guy was sitting on the couch, and we hear the window crack, and I see something go flying up to the ceiling and land on his lap. It was a bullet. It was a bullet from a 22 when we lived on the third floor. So luckily, those were the circumstances. But still to this day, I have no idea the details around that. Just randomly, a bullet. We called the police. They came real quick because they were probably like right around the corner watching us anyways. I don't know. Never found out because less than a week later, the authorities came to get this guy, right? So they get him. I'm all, oh, yeah. I swear, that version of me, anyways. They come get him. They place him on house arrest. So he had an ankle bracelet on for like a year and a half or something like that. Not at the same time though. There was like a slot in between where he was free to be a parent and a husband, right? There wasn't much of a difference in that slot of time, right? But it got really bad for me. So someone who doesn't want to work, super duper lazy, barks at everybody, super obnoxious, for them to have an ankle bracelet on, right? Very abusive too. Is like a vacation. They don't have to do anything. They can't really leave the house. The only thing they can do when they can only leave the house to work. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, off to work, nothing else. You could do nothing else. So, except, maintain your home dynamic as a tyrant. That never stops. Consistent with that. So to recap, abusive spouse, right? 72-hour work weeks, 2 children who had trouble in school. One of them has special needs. Gunshots coming through the window, and being followed by authorities and random vehicles everywhere I went. Don't forget, I'm being called crazy the entire time. All right. So people are looking and like, there's something off with her at work. So I was like trying to find a therapist at this time, right? Because everything was my fault. No matter which angle we looked at it from, right? Everything was my fault at that point. So I'm like, let me go get checked. I mean, there's got to be something wrong with me, right? No therapist. So my boss at the time set me up with employee assistance program. They came right away, like 2 days later. So I'm meeting a therapist. I'm kind of excited about it. I was looking forward to this appointment. I'm like, yay. And it was very secret. Um, it was in the building where I work, just like meet in the basement, room 511 or whatever, and there'll be someone there. So I was already very anxious by the time I got there because it was just a weird setup. And then I start my stuff, they're like, what's going on? And I'm like, um, I'm really overwhelmed. I don't feel like anyone understands what's going on with me. Like, I don't feel like anyone understands my life, my day, like how it goes. Um, and like I have my support system, my sisters and stuff. I can't talk to, the husband about it because he gets snappy, and I just, it's more of a hassle to talk to him than to just do the things that need to be done and, muddle through the day, right? So then the therapist is like, then don't talk to him. And I'm like, oh, well, yeah. So I guess I should just really start talking to like my family and friends about this. You know what I'm saying? Why do you need to talk to anybody? I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Um, so I'm like, well, I'm just always so tired. I'm like, I can't eat right. I don't know. I'm like shaking all the time. I don't even know what to do. Go to bed early and eat better stuff. Right. So I had enough of a head on me, you know what I mean, to be like, well, I know I need some help, but I'm not getting it from that person. So I was like, well, now she had confirmed for me that I was the problem at this point. So I'm like, I'm going to get another therapist and just wait it out until I can get a therapist that's not part of an EAP program. So I muddled through until I was able to find a therapist that was taking new patients and get an appointment with them. So I got the appointment, and by this time, like the ex-father-in-law, he used to come to dry out, like stay for like a week or two, but he was really helpful. Wonderful man. Rest in peace, Wallace, right? So usually there would be a break. I'd get a break when he comes because he liked to clean, he liked to cook, he liked to do all sorts of stuff. But this time, when I needed it the most, just saying, not much. There was not much of that this time, right? So now I have an extra house guest plus all the other stuff that I was doing. So I go to this appointment. She asked a bunch of questions. It took about 45 minutes to fill out the paperwork, answer some intake questions, but I was like, I really need to talk to you about, I can't do this whole appointment doing intake red tape stuff. I was like, I really need to talk, right? So she slots in 15 minutes for the end of this session, and I start explaining from beginning to end, from literally like the day I got married, and I like spewed it out. I was anxious and I felt rushed and all this. And at this point, I just felt like it was already confirmed for me in my head that I was the problem, and everything was really heavy, right? So I finish and I'm like, and I wait for some advice, and she goes, so what is it that brought you here today? Is it your husband? I'm like, yeah, yep, it's my husband. That's all. None of the other stuff. Yes, it's my husband. What would you like to tell me? Like, what should I do? And I literally dissociated for her to speak out and tell me, spew whatever she said, and I left. That was my last therapy appointment. That was like 2008, 2009-ish. But between after that appointment and now, a lot worse has happened. And at that point, at that last therapy appointment, I had already started planning my demise, so to speak. So this whole thing is just to be like, if therapy isn't working for you, there are other options. But happy Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Sometimes you just don't leave for various reasons.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Store-bought pesto, crazy. So this is about crazy coincidences. So this story takes place back in 2015. This was the year that it was really big for the Share a Coke campaign, where it was like share a Coke with your name. And my name is Melissa, so every time I went into the store, I was looking for my name because I thought it would be really cool to find a can or a bottle with my name on it. But for whatever reason, even though I have a general basic name, could not find it. So I kind of gave up hope, forgot about it, and moved on. So now it is August of that year, and my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, had gone out with some of his friends. And now it's about 11 o'clock at night. I ended up getting a phone call that says that he'd been in a really bad car accident. So, of course, I'm freaking out. So I had my pajamas on. I hurry up, just throw some clothes on and rush to the hospital. It's about maybe 25-minute trip from our house. And I actually end up beating the ambulance there. So eventually his family shows up. My family shows up. And we're just sitting in the waiting room for a couple hours, just waiting to hear how he's doing. So my now father-in-law asked me if I would like something to drink. I realized at that moment I had forgotten my wallet. He's like, nope, you're good. Like, I'll get it for you. What would you like? And normally, if you know anything about me, if you ask me what I want to drink, the answer is always a soda. But that night I was so thirsty, I was like, I'll just take a water, please. So he goes to the vending machine. He comes back a couple minutes later. He's like, they're out of waters. And I'm like, it's okay. Like, I'll take a Coke. Like, it's fine because I hate Coke machines. So he goes, he gets me a bottle of Coke and he brings it back. And I take a sip, put it down, and he goes, what name is on your bottle? And so I pick it up and I look at it, and immediately in my head, my thought is, this has got to be some kind of joke. Because I'm still like anxious, nervous, like we're in the hospital waiting. And I pick it up and I look at it, and I'm sure you can guess whose name was on it. And so I look, and it's got my name on it, and I pick it up and I show everybody, and everybody's like, what? No, that's so crazy. Like, what are the odds that that would happen? I'm like, so yeah, I ended up with a Coke bottle randomly coming out of a machine in the hospital with my name on it. So I took that as a sign that my boyfriend / husband was going to be okay. And that was kind of like God's way of showing me that it was going to be okay. Like, that was my sign. Ultimately, he did have some broken bones, and everything, but he, for the most part, is fine. But yeah, so here is that bottle. I actually keep it in my memory book. And it's or in my memory box, it's actually become something that's very special to me. And it's actually more special to me that it came to me in that way than had I had just randomly found it that somewhere in the store. So, yep. Pretty cool. But yeah, store-bought pesto? Now that's crazy.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
That's wild. When I was a little girl, about 8 years old, my father used to own an auto body shop. A lot of times he would work late, so my mom would gather myself and my brothers and sisters to go up to the shop to help him close down. This one random night, this lady walked up to the shop and asked my parents if they could give her a ride to the bar down the street. My parents agreed. We shut down. We got in the car. As we were driving down the street, my parents, at this time in their life, they were really heavily invested in the church, so they started preaching the word of God to her. As we arrived, my parents asked if they could pray for her. She said sure. We bowed our heads, we prayed, she burst into tears, and before she got out the car, she confessed that she was about to kill her boyfriend. As she was getting out the car, she reached in her purse, took out a butcher knife, threw it in the trash. That's crazy. That pesto, though. That pesto.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Yeah, girl, that is crazy. So this one time when I was younger, about like 12 or 13, I was staying the night at my cousin's. And this was about like 2 or so in the morning. Everyone else was dead asleep, but I wasn't. I deal with bouts of insomnia, so this wasn't anything new. So I'm just chilling on this computer, have my headphones in, being quiet so I don't wake up my cousin. Or the house, for that matter. And I'm just scrolling, waiting to get tired enough to fall asleep. And as I'm scrolling, I kind of have that sense that someone is standing behind me, like right behind me, looking over my shoulder. Like, kind of that feeling you get when you feel like someone's watching you. I had that. But like, I just brushed it off thinking like, oh, it's the middle of the night, it's dark, my brain's just trying to freak me out. But then, like a couple seconds after I brush off that feeling and I'm fine, I feel a hand on my shoulder. Like a full-on weight of a human hand. I whip around and no one's behind me. The only person in the room is my dead-ass sleeping cousin. Like, he's snoring the whole nine. And so, I'm thinking, oh, it's probably my other two cousins trying to freak me out. I tiptoe into their, like, in their room. I crack the door open. They're also, like, fast asleep. And I just am looking around the rest of the house. My aunt and uncle are also asleep. And so I'm just, like, a whole new level of freaked out. So I definitely don't go to sleep that night. I just stay up on the computer until it's light outside. And then when I get back home, I tell my mom about what happened. And that in turn has her tell me about this story to when, before I was born, she had an aunt who lived and died in that house. And then a couple of years after she had died, my mom and my dad had me and they moved into that house. And then my mom told me that every now and then she would notice things being moved, like they would be in a different spot to where she would put them. Things would be getting knocked off of the top of the refrigerator or off of the counter, the table, whatever. And the freakiest part is that whenever she would be like holding me and playing with me, I would look at her for a minute and then my head would like look past her as if someone was standing behind her, and I would start laughing and giggling. And then she would look around to see if it's my dad, but he wasn't there. No one was there behind her. So I would just be laughing and giggling at nothing. So after she told me that, me and her both came to the unanimous conclusion that both the times when I was a baby and the time when I was at my cousin's, that was the great aunt whom I have never met trying to meet me. Oh, and another freakier tidbit that I forgot to mention is that the bedroom that I was in playing on my cousin's computer, that was the room my great aunt died in.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto. I don't know why. I think it's because it never has enough.
Wow, Susie. I don't know if I can top that, but it does remind me of this one time. I was 12 years old. I had just gotten my first horse that I've been begging for years. And after 3 months of owning him, he got really sick, and a virus called strangles, where it's pretty deadly to older horses, and unfortunately for him, he was an older horse. It was also in the middle of winter. He was underweight as it was, and it just wasn't looking good for him. After about 2 weeks of being sick, I think my parents had kind of already decided that he wasn't going to make it, but they weren't telling me. They were letting me stay home from school so I can be with him, and in my mind I thought, you guys are letting me stay home from school. He must be dying. So, in the middle of the night, one night, on one of his worst days, I was woken up by what I think to be was a voice of an angel. And the voice said to me, go outside and check on Judge. That was his name. So, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm hearing an angel. He must be well. So I put my boots on. I run outside. I look at the clock. It was about 3 a.m. Flick on the barn lights, and I'm thinking I'm going to see him moving and walking and eating and doing the normal horse stuff. But instead, what I see is the same way that I left him. He hadn't ate in a long time. He wasn't interested in drinking anymore. So my mind started shifting to, if I'm hearing an angel, that means he must be dying. So I start preparing myself to not be seeing him anymore. And the way he was, he was so sick and so miserable. And I just decided right there that he really needs to go to heaven. This is just really sad to watch. So I put my hand on his head, and his head was almost to the ground. He wasn't gonna put his head up or anything like that. He was really, really sick. So his nose was basically touching the ground for like 48 hours at that point. So I put my hand on his head, and this is the very first time that I prayed in my whole life. And I said, Lord, I don't know what I said. It was something along the lines of, Lord, he is so sick and he just needs to go to heaven. Will you please take him now so he can be out of his misery? And right there, he lifted up his head. And if you guys know anything about horses, they can flick their lip up. It kind of looks like a smile. Anyway, he lifted up his head and he looked out at the sky. Again, it's 3 a.m. There's just a bunch of stars and the moon was out. And he lifted up his lip as if he was smiling. And I'll never forget this. I looked over to see what he was looking at, and it was Jesus. And as I was looking at him, I wasn't quite sure what was going on, so I looked back at my horse, and my horse, I had noticed, was worshiping him. And it was just the most remarkable thing. And I looked again and saw what he was looking at, and it was the Lord. I recognized who he was. It didn't take me, hardly 1 second. It actually, it did take me a second because I had to see what my horse was looking at, but I was kind of like thinking, is this a dream? Is this? And I looked back at him, and all I could do was just fall to my knees. And that's basically what my horse was doing too. And I just love the fact that he recognized our Creator even before I did. It was just the most wonderful, peaceful. There was absolutely no room physically for any fear, no doubt, no evil. And in that moment of being in the presence of the Lord, I got this download of, you're fine, your life is going to be okay. Your horse is going to be well, and all of these things. I just knew in that moment that nothing else mattered but him and what he had in store for us as like the world and even just myself and even my horse, an animal. And to me, that just, if he cares that much about an animal, imagine what he thinks of us. So the next moment, as I'm sitting there looking at the Lord and noticing that he's right in front of me, I wake up in bed the next day, and I was just like, I remember waking up thinking, did that actually happen? Was that just a dream? This is wild. It was just so surreal. So my confirmation was when I put my feet on the floor, my boots were right there, right by my bed. So the moral of this story is, basically, the Lord just loves us. He really wants to know you. And I didn't pray for him to come see me or anything like that. He showed up, and he'll do the same for you. Maybe not in the same aspect, but you call upon the Lord, and I promise you, he will show up. And it'll be in a really big way. And my horse was perfectly healed. It wasn't, you couldn't notice anything physically changed about him. However, he started eating after that night. He started drinking again. He lived another 10 years. And after that, him and I were just, you couldn't separate us. I tried one time. I tried selling him, and it just did not work out. And he came right back home with me. He lived with me for the rest of his life. I got to take him into the next life, and we were just so close and so tight-knit. After that, he had like a huge personality that he did not show me before that. And I think just every day that he and I looked at each other, I think we just knew, like, wow, I can't believe that happened to us. He was just my daily reminder of, oh yeah, that one time that Jesus showed up in a barn where he was born. Jesus loves barns. If you guys really want to know who he is, go start cleaning a barn or something, because he'll be there. I promise you that. So Jesus loves you. If you have any questions about him, reach out to me or anybody else who has a real relationship with the Lord. Not religious, but relationship. Bless you. And Susie, I am not down for that store-bought pesto.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto. I don't know why.
That's so crazy, Susie. It reminds me about this time that I found out one of our family friends was actually a serial rapist. So my dad was a trucker. He worked for a company that there was also another friend that he met was also like Fijian. Their family lived like a block away from us. Such a coincidence, right? They had 2 sons. Both of them were truckers too. So, you know, parents got along great. They loved one of the sons that always like hung out with the parents. A lot older than I was at the time. I was like a sophomore in high school. The son was like in the mid 20s at the time. Everybody loved him. He was genuinely like kind, pretty sweet, always like getting gifts, always there when you needed favors, whatever you need, you just ask and he was there. It's one of those where you can always like depend on, really reliable model citizen son, right? So fast forward a couple of years, he gets married, buys a house, starts a family, has 2 kids, and I mean, he was cool, but there was something that like my intuition picked up where I was just like, don't like this, don't like him, don't like that, don't come near me, like literally do not touch me. Pulled a knife on homeboy one time because he came too close, and something told me it was just like a stay the fuck away from him, right? So fast forward a couple more years later, out of high school, I'm in college, and randomly a notification pops up of a story, a news story. So I open it, I'm like, what the heck? Homeboy was arrested for being a serial rapist. He would hire women, not only in like the state that he lived, but across like 3 or 4 states doing this, got caught up, right? Would hire women to go on dates, essay them, rob them, and then move on. Like, did this multiple times before he got caught. There was just something so off about him that I couldn't figure it out at the time, but that I was just like, wow, trust your intuition, because what the like, I hated it when he even came close to any of my like girl cousins who were around my age at the time. So homeboy's like in his like mid-late 20s, and we would be like teenagers. Like, I don't know, I just didn't like it. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't put my like thumb on it. But when that came out, I was like, whew, thank goodness for my intuition. But Pesto, that shit's nuts too.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Well, that is pretty crazy, girl. But let me tell you what, I have seen some crazy things too. Maybe not as crazy as store-bought pesto, but you know, bear with me here. So, I've worked in customer service a really, really long time. Let's just say since I was 19 years old. And I just want to share this little story with you. So, I work in a government building, and I work in customer service. I'm not going to say exactly what building it is, but it's somewhere everybody has to go, but you really don't want to go, and you're going to be there for a long time. So we'll just say that. So it's just me and my coworkers, and we're all girls in there, all Southern women. So we're minding our own business, okay? We're minding our own business. And it's actually a pretty slow day, let's say in the middle of summer. So all of a sudden our door flies open, and all we see is a leg. And it's an older lady who is just dressed super nice, like she's going to church or something. And when she swings that leg and that door open, I'm talking like full-blown circle, she farts. She farts. And I don't know what happens when you grow up, but like, I don't know, it's like you like revert a little bit, and everything that was funny in middle school, it's funny again. And So we're laughing. We're trying so hard not to laugh, though, because now we have a customer who has just come into the office, and it's this really well-dressed, sweet, older lady, and so we're trying to hold it together. I straight up can't do it. I had to leave the room. So my one coworker is trying to wait on her, and she's just straight up, like, can't do it. And she's, like, trying to hold her laughing so hard that she starts crying, and the lady was like, "Oh dear, are you okay?" And she said, "I just got some bad news." She was able to squeak that out. And then we had one other coworker in there, and she was just straight up like, she somehow maintained her composure. I don't know how she did it. But me and the other girl were in the vault just laughing. I mean, laughing. And when the other coworker was done, she said, "Y'all owe me big for that." And we did. We truly did. Because, like, no way. It was... I wish that was the only story I had about someone just farting in front of me, and I have to, like, just not be mentally a 7th grade-year-old girl. Oh my god. But yeah, that pesto. Sounds delicious, but super crazy.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Susie girl, that's crazy. I don't cook, but I totally believe you. It's almost as crazy as this time when I was working at the vet clinic that the freezer was so full of bodies from euthanasias that I had to start putting them in the snowbank. Yeah, in order to keep them cold. So for those of you that don't know, euthanasias in the vet clinic increase about 20 to 50% during the holidays, meaning Thanksgiving and Christmas. And there's a lot of theories as to why this is. Some people say it's because, they don't want to leave their pets at home while they're traveling. They don't want to pay to have them boarded. So they just, I guess, get rid of that responsibility. Other people say it's because they feel bad when family members come over and say things like, "Oh my God, Bella looks so much worse than last year. Like, when are you going to put her out of her misery?" And then I would say the last one that is pretty common is people love giving puppies and kittens for Christmas presents. And so when we see this massive increase in euthanasias during the holidays, we will then see a huge increase in new puppy and kitten exams after the first of the year. And we have a huge problem in veterinary medicine right now. We have one of the highest suicide rates of any profession. And I definitely think this is a contributing factor. Because as someone who used to do 8 to maybe 15 euthanasias per shift during the holidays, it is mentally draining, exhausting, and honestly, it's so sad. So if you're going to take anything away from this video, it would be that don't euthanize your pets just because they're old. Age is not a disease. And if you could please just be nice to your veterinary staff, and not just any time of the year. I mean, you should be nice all the time, but especially during the holidays, because you never know if that tech or that doctor just came from their 10th euthanasia of the day and they are about to crumble and break down right in front of you. And apparently don't buy store-bought pesto, says Susie.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Susie, what the fuck? It does remind me of this one time when I was in middle school and I wanted to be just like Taylor Swift, so I started writing music, writing songs, performing them, and I had a little 6th grade boyfriend whose name was Blake. I'm not gonna say his last name, but I will say his first name because I wrote a song about Blake, put his name in it because Mama said that it was okay. And because I had unrestricted access to the internet at the age of 12, I posted it on YouTube. Because that's what normal 12-year-olds do. I live in a small town, so you can imagine the waves that this caused. And if that wasn't bad enough, me and Blake broke up after an incredibly long 3 months together. 3 months in 6th grade is like 10 years in a relationship. So this was, big heartbreak for me at the time. And he moved schools too, so it was like just like blow after blow. When he moved to his new school, he started dating this other girl. Susie, the girlfriend after the breakup sucks so bad. Her name was Brooklyn. I'm saying her name because guess what? I didn't learn. I wrote a song called Dear Miss Brooklyn. Her name was in the title. Posted on YouTube, and the reckoning that ensued upon me, which, so fair. I did that. What was I expecting? Her mom called my mom. It became a whole thing. But the whole middle school was eating this shit up. And I was loving the attention. I'm getting invited to all the birthday parties. I get invited to this one birthday party. She even asked me, bring your guitar. I want you to play some songs for us. I walk in, and who's standing right there? You guessed it, Blake and Brooklyn. 6th grade me is shaking in her freaking boots. But the birthday girl was like, please go up and play those songs. I could say, no, I don't care if it's your birthday. I'm not doing that. I'm not gonna embarrass myself in front of all these people. Or I could go, what the hell? So I did. I sang the songs, and the whole room was singing along. I mean, I felt like I could have been playing in Madison Square Garden. It felt awesome. I am still a songwriter. I still perform. One of the best crowds I've ever played for. Anyway, but honestly, Susie, store-bought Pesto is not that bad.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought Pesto.
That's crazier than the time when I was a teenager and my best friend came to stay the night with me, and her stepdad called the next day to say she couldn't come home because her mom had been picked up for sex work in exchange for illicit substances. And then we just didn't hear from them for 3 months, and when her mom showed back up, she'd actually been chilling in Miami for 2 months. She'd gotten out of jail after 1. And she shows back up with my best friend's stepdad, a teddy bear, a black eye, and a baby pooch. And then 6 months after that, she has the baby, right? And I walk in, I look at the baby, I look at the mom, I look at her stepdad, and I look at my best friend, and I go, that baby ain't white. Her mom threw a shoe at me, told me to shut the fuck up. That baby wasn't white. And it took that man 5 years to find out that that baby wasn't his. He thought melanin skipped a generation in his family. We had to tell him that it wasn't his kid for him to find out. But yeah, store-bought Pesto, that's crazy.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought Pesto.
Susie, you're a kook. That's why I love you. And that story reminds me of the time that I was tear gassed by the Israeli military when I was 7 years old. So my family had gone to the West Bank to visit my grandparents who lived in a small town outside of Ramallah. And during that time, from the moment we landed till the moment we left, we were literally just harassed by the Israeli military. There were snipers living on the top of my grandparents' home and on the homes nearby. They were constantly pointing guns at us. And in the middle of the night, there'd be these raids that would happen where Israeli soldiers would simply raid the house and break and destroy everything that they could see. They broke all the locks on my grandparents' doors, and they would oftentimes find my uncle, take him up to the roof, and beat the shit out of him. But that's not what this story is about. What this story is about is how one day, just as we were sort of hanging out downstairs in my grandparents' house, suddenly we saw a canister fly through, and it was a tear gas canister, and it filled the entire room, the entire house with tear gas, causing us all to be sick and vomit. And my 6-month-old brother was actually in a separate room with the doors closed, sleeping. And because we were so violently ill, no one could get to him. So when we finally did get to him, just by sheer luck, my uncle, who had not been home at the time, had raced through, opened the door, and was giving my younger brother, he was helping him breathe. And because of that, he survived. So Susie, I know a lot of people don't like store-bought pesto. I don't like occupation.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
That is crazy. One time I had this science teacher, and he was a creep, and like he went to festivals and like raves and stuff, but he didn't drink. So you know what he did do, you know? He looked like a crackhead. Anyway, one time he planned in a test which he only gives like 3 days for the study, and like because it wasn't technically a test, it was fine, and like we were like, no, you're gonna give us time to study because science is fucking hard. And he basically my year just got together and blackmailed him with his porn. And they were basically just like, if you don't move the test back, we're gonna release this. So he moved the test back. Next year he quit. He also had a conspiracy theory website, which is weird because he's a science teacher, and the website like said that he didn't believe in a moon landing. So I'm like, it's no wonder that I was failing this class.
Call me crazy if you want, but I've never liked store-bought pesto.
Oh my gosh, girl, that is wild. Anyway, one time I went to like 5 different doctors in like 3 different states over the course of 2 years in order to get a medically necessary hysterectomy because no one would do it without husband consent. And I was divorced. Crazy. Anyway, I just want to recognize the fact that we have less rights now. That was like a decade ago. We have less rights than a decade ago. Crazy. Early voting is open. Go vote!